Hello, hello. What is up, gamers? What is good? It is the end of the month again. I feel like February just flew by. I don't know about you, but that's just how it goes sometimes. It is the short month or whatever. Pretty exciting month for Jump as well. We had two new series, and at long last, the Elusive Samurai finally drew to a close. We're going to start off by talking about that. Let me just pull up my notes. And we'll dive right into the final chapters of the Elusive Samurai. Now, I think it was pretty obvious that the series was going to end soon. Um, we just had kind of caught up to the history of Tokiyuki's life, and he was going to be executed and everything, and it's kind of hard to imagine the series going much further after your main character is dead. At the same time, though, I didn't think it was impossible that we would have an entire other arc or even entire saga, some substantial run of the series that broke free of this sort of historical mapping and took it in just completely bizarre directions. This series has always had kind of twin goals. One, of course, being depicting these actual historic events, turning. Oh my gosh, I burped and coughed simultaneously. Actually, we're gonna pause. 1 second. Oh man. Have you ever done that where you burp and cough at the same time? It's horrible. Anyways, so yeah, this series was all about taking the actual historical life of Tokiyuki, turning it into this battle-packed, exciting manga. But then it also had this parallel goal of kind of like fourth wall breaking, meta commentary on the historical action, leaning into this perspective from the future, often jumping ahead to modern day and kind of recasting the characters as modern archetypes and just sort of exploring how, it's still humans throughout all these generations and what would these humans look like and blah 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 blah. This aspect was leaned into heavily running up to the finale, the final battle with Takauji, of course having some really bizarre fourth wall breaking moments that I really really enjoyed. So I thought, what if the series now jumps to the modern day and we get like a dozen chapter long coda talking about the descendants of Tokiyuki or Takauji battling it out. Or even in the penultimate chapter where they end up in the afterlife. I had not been informed that it was going to end next chapter. I'm sure they announced that somewhere, but I just hadn't seen it. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we're going to get a whole afterlife arc, for all I know, where we bring back a ton of dead characters. Takauji as well is dead, and we get to explore their eternal conflict unfolding into the afterlife as well. It seemed like there was a whole lot of potential for that kind of like real craziness to just unfold. There was some precedent for it. I was pretty excited about that. So I was a little disappointed that it indeed did come to an end, even though, realistically that was the most plausible thing. As I said, the primary goal of the series was to tell the story of Tokiyuki's life, which does come to a close in this month's worth of chapters. I loved the final. Now that it's the end, we can kind of acknowledge this moment. Almost a fourth wall break where one of the characters says, I'm only saying this because it's the end, but why is he so sexy as he flees? Acknowledging this long-running kind of joke, kind of just strange thing of this series that Tokiyuki doesn't just enjoy fleeing, but it is like a fetish for him, and he's getting off on the idea of dodging attacks and running from people and taunting them and having that sort of weird, powerless and yet powerful control over them. But yeah, that I thought was really, really, really funny. Just the perfect punchline to something that had been happening since the very start of the series. We see him pass away, his dying words. talking about the fun that he had. Beautiful. Then we get the obligatory wrap up of so many characters. I think this is pretty standard fare for long running series, especially shonen series. When you get to the end, you got to spend some time revisiting everybody, having little final send offs to your entire cast. Here, it kind of is even more profound because most of these are real people, and we do know to some extent what happens to them. So it's not just kind of the whims of the author, it's not just written for the reader's catharsis, but still small moments of historical note. We get to see the remaining years of Takauji's life as well. Very poetic, very beautiful, with just this kind of sweeping grand feeling of, even after 230 chapters, how well did we really know these people? How much of this really resonates with us when we think that these are real people? How all these grand designs and wars and campaigns and betrayals and alliances all now just feel like individual grains passing through our fingers through the grand flow of time. Really, really lovely stuff. Seeing all these send offs, just reminding us of this perspective of, the long, long arc of history and how everything we've seen are just sort of flashes, just instants. And yet, one that is continuous. A lot of references to how descendants of Takauji and Tokiyuki may be living among us. How diluted, maybe diluted sounds like an odd word to use, how spread out their bloodlines became after all these generations. We just simply don't know. All of that stuff has been washed into the historical record, and now between all the clans claiming descendancy of Tokiyuki and then all the ones that might be legitimate but unacknowledged, we just have no idea. And I think that's meant to kind of just invigorate some sense of continuity and presence of this story in our lives. As a non-Japanese person, I don't know if it hits the same for me. Ain't no way I'm related to Tokiyuki, but surely, we got to go back maybe another dozen generations before him. We've got some common ancestry, I bet. And then we return to what turns out to be a hellscape. I really love how casually they acknowledge, we're definitely going to hell. We killed so many people. And then they're like, well, actually, it turns out that even if you kill, like, microorganisms by stepping on them, if you swat a fly or whatever, you go to hell. And paradise, heaven, is really just, like, very small amoeba and stuff like that that have never killed. I thought that was very funny. It kind of reminded me of the sitcom The Good Place, where they find out that everyone has been going to hell for, like, the past 800 years because it is just so impossible to live life without sin. But, he realizes that everyone he knows is in hell, and eventually all of his loved ones that are still alive will join him in hell. And then he learns that hell is actually this unending war zone of different tribes made up of ferocious leaders throughout history that are both allying with and battling against hordes of literal demons. This entire series has been playing Oni tag and running away from people playing the role of demon. And now he basically gets to spend his entire time fleeing and waging campaigns and delighting in battle, and hell is indeed paradise for him. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that's just such an awesome final little coda, I think. Of all the typical modes of shonen series ending, I think the "and now our adventures continue" is one of my favorites, especially if it is "our adventures continue" in this kind of profound way, or this way that is, like, profoundly different than what it was before, that still has all the same, like, fun and scenarios, but it isn't just like, oh, okay, now we're gonna go, like, wage a war on this other continent, but something that's, like, dimensionally different, I think is very provocative in the imagination. So it's not just like, oh, there could have been more of the manga, but rather, had the manga continued, it would have been profoundly different. That's something that I think both really significantly marks an ending while still kind of like carrying forward all of the fun and goodwill and adventure that had led you up until that point. That's how I think One Piece is going to end too, by the way, but you can watch my video on what I think the ending of One Piece will be and what the One Piece is and everything to learn more about that. But at any rate, I love endings like this. I just love that it has both the finality of him dying and all of this feeling of conclusions and of stories ending, but then also just has this intoxicating sense of the new, of the undiscovered, of this entirely new world of hell and all of the battles. And I don't know, it stimulates the imagination so much. It's such a funny punchline too, I think. That throughout this entire series, there are so many questions of people's character and a spectrum of morality that people fell on different places and then moved to different places with actions that were both condemned and championed. It really is kind of like a morality tale, as many historical stories are reinterpreted as. But then the final punchline after all of that is that they're all in hell together. The traitors and the loyal people and those that sacrifice themselves for others and those that selfishly, sadistically killed and everyone in between, they're all in hell. I love it. Honestly, this was like one of my favorite Shonen Jump finales maybe ever. I struggled to think of many that executed it better. I think it helped that they had such a clear vision of what the series would contain, the pace at which they wanted to depict it. It's a real guy's life. You kind of set out to just cover all of that. And Matsui Sensei, of course, has the clout within Jump after a couple other hit series. The one about the psychic guy whose name eludes me, and of course Assassination Classroom, to just get that run, to get the runway to do all of that, and to not really worry about that much more, right? So unlike so many other amazing Jump series, there was no sense that at the end it was getting rushed. There was no sense that they had to cut things out or pick up the pace or smush things together, which is already very, very rare. And then just like I said, I think it just so beautifully combines both feelings of conclusion with feelings of transcendence. Really, just truly, truly wonderful stuff. Honestly, I'm like kind of racking my brains. There's a lot of Jump finales that I think are very good given the circumstances, very good given that they're obviously quite rushed or whatever, or cut short. But there's not that many that I think as well too that like so many of them end with a big battle. So you have the big battle and then you have a couple chapters of like just sentimentality, just revisiting characters, tying up loose ends or whatever. Whereas here it's like we had all of the big climactic battles, but then there was almost like a full arc of just kind of aftermath, and it really felt like a coda, like the final time skip, and Takauji now exorcised of the evil god, now living as a mortal in his life as a mortal. Like there's just so many kind of like smaller moments at the end that really kind of give it a true kind of like outro, you know what I'm saying? Instead of just like climax, everybody hugs the end, which I think can be very powerful and very exciting, but doesn't really have, the same gravitas, or just doesn't feel like that exciting a story. Yeah, I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more I like it. I wouldn't say that this was like my favorite series or anything, I thought it was very good for the whole duration. I liked the mode of depicting these big battles and the tactics and these long campaigns and the breadth of the cast, the historical aspects of it. All very, very, very solid stuff, but I wouldn't even count myself as like a Giga fan. It probably wouldn't make like the top 5 things running in Jump for me at any given time. Probably more like the lower half of top 10. But this finale, I think, has just gone above and beyond. I think it's just the perfect send off, and I'm so impressed. It's 3 for 3 for Matsui Sensei so far in Jump. Isn't that insane? Of course, none of them were ever like top of the magazine, but to be able to take 3 series to the 200s, have them very well received, and Ass Class, I think, as well, had an amazing finale. I still got to read his first series. But now I'm just wondering, can he go 4 for 4? I don't think we'll see it right away, but maybe in a year or so, I would not be surprised at all if he returned to Jump. It seems like he really wants to work here. It seems like he's got a great sense for what works in the magazine, what succeeds. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start reading another series that's going to go the distance from him sooner than later. I will give this a P- for the month. Congratulations. Very, very rare distinction. And now let's talk about some of the new series that are coming in to replace it. First, let's talk about Kirino's Magic. And here, this is the monkey's paw. My hand is the monkey's paw. Okay? And this, what you're hearing, is me a year ago. Boy, I sure wish there was more fantasy world series in Jump. I'm tired of stuff that's just like Tokyo, but they're spirits. Give me like a true fantasy world. The monkey's paw finger curls, and we get Sisekai in Jump. So, Sisekai is a term that I came up with a while ago, just making a video looking at like future seasons of anime. So it's of course, Isekai is other world, Sisekai is same world. A little Latin Japanese fusion joke for you there. Sisekai to me is just fantasy worlds that don't really do anything that isn't in like either Dragon Quest or Lord of the Rings, where the world building isn't really so much like about the history of the fantasy world or what's unique about it or the society of it or the culture of it, but rather mechanics that would be in like a video game. And it's all just like sword and sorcery, guilds, quests, taverns, things that, you know, are lampshading tropes from JRPGs, like Dragon Quest style JRPGs of starting towns and orphans. And that end up being like isekai power fantasies in almost every case, often harems as well. But without the gimmick of being transported into another world. It's just the same world. It's people that were born in this world, but the world is no different than a video game that your isekai protagonist gets sucked into or whatever. Here, and this will shock you, our main character has a power that seems useless for combat, but instead, in fact, oh my gosh, it is incredibly strong. He has the power of Sentai magic, I think is what it's called. Seitai. Which is just like massaging pressure points, the kind of like holistic Japanese healing practice. It's sort of like an ancient Japanese cultural thing. I think it's typically associated with like old folks, you know, you go get your joints limbered up and stuff like that. But he's able to use it, oh my gosh, not to just support the heroes as like a healer class, but he is able to manipulate the mana of other people using this, which makes it very strong offensively. He is able to put his mana into a ball and then fire off the ball, which like is really boring to me. All of it is so boring to me. Lately it seems like Jump has been scooping up a few genres that have been doing really well in like other magazines, and trying to do kind of their own version, their own spin on it. And sometimes it's genres that I like the 1v1 rom-com, which is well represented in Someone Hertz. But lately it's been some genres I am not into. I do not read these for a reason. So, you know, we have your very typical start of he meets some adventurers and he helps them out, and now he's gonna go be an adventurer. Yup. He has to go get his magic power assessed so he can get an adventurer grade, which is definitely a thing that makes sense in an actual world and not just like some fucking video game shit that they do in their real world for some reason. And then they have to go kill slimes. Like, literally, they go kill slimes. And I don't know, man. It's not terrible. Like, the art is nice. I like that there's a bit of kind of goofy comedy with it. There's some fan service. That's always kind of fun. There is kind of like a unique element that he's more a supporter class, and they seem to be leaning into that a little bit more. Like in the latest chapter, he, instead of just fighting himself, cures his party member and increases the flow of her mana using like circulation things. And then of course there's a fan service scene. But the action scene after that wasn't so bad. Some of the action scenes are kind of cool. I just can't believe that it's like he uses his power in such a novel way. He turns it into a ball of energy and hits people with it. That's crazy. It's just like so inherently dull and just uncreative conceptually. And of course, like, it's just this kind of like slapdash lampshading of like, well, you know, we're an adventurers guild, you know what that means. It's time for us to take on some quests, you know what that means. It's like, yeah, man, I know what this means because this has been the dominant genre of anime and manga for like 10 years now. And it's like never been interesting. It's like never been creative or anything. And it's like just a dredge, like this dreadful, rotting thing that asphyxiated itself onto the fantasy genre. Whereas fantasy used to be about novelty and seeing new worlds and seeing the creator's spin on a wide variety of cultural sources and legends and myths being woven together, and not just like literally just Dragon Quest. Well, what are we gonna do in this one? We're gonna fight the Demon Lord. Holy, oh my god, and guess what? There's a dragon. What does it look like? It looks like every other fucking dragon. And what's crazy to me is that we get like the high art example of this, which is like Frieren that everyone pogs over. And we get something like Konosuba, which is like LOL-based epic comedy or whatever. But it's just like the same thing. It's like the same thing. It's like the same party going out on the same kind of quests, using like the same types of attacks and shit. The world is like indistinguishable. If a character from Frieren walked into the world of Konosuba, I would not be able to tell the difference, and vice versa. It's all just like guilds and adventures, taverns, and a tank and a mage and a hero and a priest. It's so devoid of creativity. Please prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong, Kintaro's magic. I will say though, it is just generic. That is my top to bottom complaint, is that it's just devoid of ideas. Outside of that, it is pretty competent. Like, the art is nice, the characterization can be fun, whatever. It's just like, why am I reading this? Can you please show me something new? Can you please show me like an idea that you had? So we'll give it a B-. I'm not enjoying it so far. Find it just very frustrating that this type of story is just so omnipresent in anime and manga right now. I need a relief, man. It's like I want a fantasy series even more than this. But check this out too. You may recall when Ichi the Witch started, I was really excited because we were at such like a deficit of true fantasy series. That's why I made my whole joke about the monkey's paw. I was like, man, like everything just is taking place in Japan these days. But now the pendulum has really shifted. So this is the current lineup. I should have included the slide at the time of Ichi the Witch, but you'll see there's quite a lot of new series that came out in a fantasy world. These are all the ones that take place, at least so far, in the real world without any like supernatural elements. These are the ones that take place in the real world, but there are supernatural elements to whatever degree. And then these are all the ones that take place in an actual full-on fantasy world. Ichi the Witch, of course, still going strong. Hunter x Hunter might be coming back. One Piece, the gold standard. Odor of the Flame, I actually was like, sweet, this is a fantasy world that is like pretty novel with its take on Viking mythology and Nordic theming and some cool looking ice enemies and generally speaking just like kind of some unique stuff. Same with Kaidegami, which had kind of like a Chinese influence and it was more kind of horror-y and demonic. Gonron Egg as well is technically post-apocalyptic Earth, but is so far post-apocalyptic that it doesn't really feel like Earth at all. And also had like a lot of pretty unique ideas. This dark fantasy world, you know, really horrific things happening, forests of flesh where things are harvested. And now, like, after these three failures, Gonron Egg is probably ending, like, next issue. We have Kintaro's Magic, which just, again, you cannot point to a single original idea. The most original aspect of it is that he's like a masseuse that becomes a mage, I guess. But how does he become a mage? What is the unique aspect of that? Well, he just shoots his ball full of mana and it flies around and hits things. Like, oh my god, it's such a deficit of ideas. All I'm gonna say is that yeah, we've filled this out, but they keep canceling them. They do not get off the ground. And if Kintaro's Magic succeeds, where all of these fail, I'm gonna be a little cross. Okay. Let's move on. And talk about Alien Headbutt. This one I feel a lot more positive about. I've been really enjoying this so far. It's wrestling, man. I like wrestling a lot. I like pro wrestling. I think that's a great thing to build a series around. I love Kinnikuman Man. This, in some ways, feels like a modern Kinnikuman Man, insofar as that it's wrestling against aliens, you know, and it seems so far to have like a very straightforward, there's just gonna be fighting, and it's very violent, which Kinnikuman Man was also very violent, even though it was also very, very goofy and stuff. So it keeps it a lot more serious, a lot more realistic, kind of gnarly, grisly art. But it does in many ways kind of feel like a successor to Kinnikuman. I love the pacing of it. I love how simple it is. I love how straightforward and direct. He just shows up and fights aliens and wrestles them. It's unclear to me yet what level of kayfabe this operates on, because he is a pro wrestler. He does pro wrestler type moves and everything. But it's unclear if in this universe pro wrestling is real or if, you know, we're gonna find out. Maybe this will be like a twist or something that was all play acted. I don't really know. But he's real freaking gnarly. He does some cool real moves and stuff too. It is truly about wrestling, much more than many other series are about what they're, you know, ostensibly about. I like the designs of the aliens too, are really gnarly, really unique, pretty scary. Cool thing where he headbutts a knife into the alien's eye. He's been infused with like alien parasites that make him stronger, which is like both badass and a little scary. I like that his character in wrestling was definitely like a heel, and he does all this kind of like sick, nasty stuff. I hope they still keep it to wrestling mostly, that they are mostly doing like real wrestling moves, albeit like exaggerated. The headbutting the knife into the eye is kind of like some deathmatch wrestling shit too, which is exciting. Maybe they'll lean even further into that. You know, there is a sizable deathmatch wrestling fan base in Japan, so I don't think it's impossible that they can do some deliberate nods there. I don't know, man. The more I talk about it, the more I'm pretty impressed with this one. It's not mind blowing. It's not like the most unique thing ever. It's not, you know, revolutionary by any stretch. I think it's just very much unique enough, and it's going to be full of novel creations and cool alien designs and maybe some twists and turns, or maybe not. Maybe he just keeps fighting aliens the whole time, and after he frees his island from alien control, he goes up to their mothership and keeps fighting. That would be sweet too. Yeah, overall, really, really enjoying it. We'll give it an A plus for its debut month. Can't wait to see more. All right, let me check my Discord messages real quick. Make sure I don't open it on stream. Okay, yeah, we good, we good. All right. Next, let's talk about Underdoctor, which had its 2nd through 4th chapters this month. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling mixed on this one. There's elements that I like. I think the art style is pretty good. The action stuff is pretty good. The character of the Underdoctor himself could be kind of interesting. But it's just kind of plain. I do like that they're doing a little bit of world building, that there seems to be some unique aspects to this world in terms of disease and underworld and this quest that he's on to save his friend from some rare disease, and all of the money he gets from this underdoctoring is to that end. Kind of interesting too, gives a good kind of structure to the whole thing. At the same time, though, like I said last month, he ain't no Blackjack. There's no edge to this guy at all. It feels very, very different than, you know, the classic Underdoctor character of Blackjack, who always had this, like, strange grayness to him, where you never... He did good deeds in the end, of course, and often it would be that his seemingly callous actions were actually schemes towards... some master plan to save people, but other times too, he was like a jerk and rude, and there was no kind of qualification of it. It was just who he was. He had a genuine abrasiveness to him. Whereas the Underdoctor, they make him kind of like quirky. His the way he falls asleep all the time or whatever, and kind of his surprising competency mixed with his aloofness, but we've seen all of those tropes like a million times over already, and it's not really surprising when it turns out that he's more caring and compassionate that he first lets on or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. And we get a bunch of fight scenes, of course. It's much more about fighting than it is about medicine. It's really just kind of like a medicine-themed battle manga, whereas I was hoping that it would kind of be like... an actual medical mystery drama, you know, when that there would be diagnosing scenes and treating scenes and him having to come up with all these sort of makeshift solutions or whatever. They have a medical consultant, but I'm not really sure why, because none of that is really that relevant here. There's an interesting thing too where he's battling like a mute assassin, and then he treats him by, like, hitting his throat, and then he can speak again. And they're like, wow, thank God. And I thought... I don't know, this is going to be a big tangent, I guess. But, like, my understanding is that these days, within the, like, deaf community and within the mute community and within ASL speakers and stuff like that, sign language speakers in general, not just the ASL, there is kind of a sense of, like, okay, well, we're reframing this as, like, it's not a disability. We don't wish we could speak or whatever. This is just, like, kind of like a separate way to live that's neither better nor worse. And, you know, it's not my place to be like, I think these people would be bad about this. But it did seem just, like, a little surprising, because it seems like he could communicate perfectly fine in sign language, and that he was, like, living a full life as someone who speaks in sign, and then it's just sort of like, wow, the miraculous doctor saved the day or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. It's strange. It's a digression though, but just kind of contributes to an overall sense of kind of weirdness with this one. It's just something's a little off. I do think they have a lot of good ingredients here. Like I said, the art style is good. The action scenes are pretty good. Although they keep abridging them in strange ways, too. Like, it cuts away then cuts back and he's like beating somebody, and I think that's meant to have like kind of aura moments, the suddenness to it, but you can only do that so much. Eventually we want to see the guy fight, right? Like that's what we're here for. I think it just needs to kind of get into a better groove and needs more actual medical mystery stuff. I think that's what could make it stand out a lot more. So we'll see. We'll see if it explores that a little more. If it can truly become a Blackjack-like. It's a tall order, of course. Blackjack, you know, an absolutely phenomenal manga by the greatest mangaka of all time. I'm not expecting something as good, but I think they could have that ambition. I think it would be a lot better if they just ripped off Blackjack more, basically. Anyways, we'll give it an A- for the month. I'm excited to see where it goes, but I don't have the highest hopes for it. Okay, next, let's talk about Nue's Exorcist. My least favorite manga in Jump. There's a lot of really strange things going on here again. They're in this whole water park battle thing to rescue a girl. His heart is like breaking open or free. That was like a new idea they came up with. He does another self-sacrifice thing where it isn't really like a test of strength or willpower or whatever, but just a test of his willingness to sacrifice himself, which again, I would just count as like lame power fantasy, where it's not like you're being asked to step up and test yourself, but instead you just have to eat some hair that you're told will turn you into like a horrible monster, which he just does like immediately, even though there's no reason for him to think that the enemy will like make good on his deal. And then of course the enemy doesn't make good on that deal and it's like, haha, well you tried to sacrifice yourself, but I won't tell you where she is anyways. But then of course it doesn't matter because he's able to be like ultra healed by the princess girl. Sure. So again, it's like, it just gets resolved like immediately, and it's unclear if he like knew that would happen, in which case it really isn't like the heroic sacrifice moment at all. And it's like weird that it was played for that, or he didn't know that would happen, in which case like why is there any like why is it resolved so quickly? Couldn't you like milk that a little bit more? And then they do like a you'll never find where I truly am type thing, because of course the villain reneges on the deal, and then literally on the next page they storm in. Oh my god, how did you find me? This is literally it. I'm not joking. You looked like you were underground in the video, and there's only one underground room in this building. What? Stupid. Absolutely stupid. Very, very, very stupid. All this stuff just totally unearned and stupid. But then, they get into the actual battle against Soranaki, and it's like an actually competent action sequence. I think this is the mode at which I can hope for the most from the series, is when it's just a big fight and people are like doing moves. Sometimes it looks pretty cool. He gets another transformation, seems unnecessary, but whatever. It's kind of the only idea they have. But I'll quibble again, because they go for a move that I like, but then they execute it incorrectly, okay? So he gets a new power-up. He slashes Soranaki's arm. It doesn't regenerate, okay? And Soranaki's like, oh, my arm isn't regenerating. Is that because of you? Do you have a new power that stops it from regenerating? Yes, I have a new power because I teamed up with this other girl, and now we have a power that makes you not regenerate. And then they do the full page shocked reaction, like the Enel face from One Piece and Skypiea when Enel finds out that his lightning attacks doesn't work on Luffy, right? But they did it at the wrong time. Okay? I don't know how the fuck you screw this up. It's like comedic timing 101. You're supposed to have him go, He cut off my arm. That's okay. I can just regenerate my arm. Looks down at arm stub. Full page reaction. It would be like if Enel hit Luffy with the attack. He hits him like a few times and he's kind of confused. And then he went, do you have some sort of ability that makes my attack not work? Yes, I am made out of rubber, and that means that your attacks won't work. And then full page reaction. It's just like the most bungled comedic timing of all time. Like, why is he freaking out? He saw his arm got cut off and it wasn't regenerating. That's when you freak out. Why was he all calm? Was he expecting Gakuro to say, no, that wasn't my power. I guess that was like a coincidence. Oh, okay. Ah, shoot. I guess I need to like eat a battery or something and then I can regenerate. Okay, phew. I'm not freaked out. It makes like no sense to me at all, man. And just in general, like, this is a way broader complaint, but I just don't like when people can just regenerate willy-nilly, and then you just need to come up with, like, the thing that stops them from regenerating. Because it's just not interesting, right? Like, it's not, like, grounded in anything. It's just, they do it until they can't. And this is something I'll fault One Piece for, too. Now we have regenerating characters in One Piece. He held out for 1,000 chapters. Kudos to him on that. Played it only when it was really significant to show how strange and demonic the enemies are now that they can regenerate. But even then, it's like the same kind of thing of like, ah, crap, they keep regenerating. We have to use like the thing that makes them not regenerate. Ugh. At any rate, the fight scene was okay. And then there was also, this is crazy, a message. There was a meaning to the events of the story that reflected something about the human condition to a greater extent. Where Soranaki is surprised at the power that makes him stop regenerating, and he realizes it's because Nue has continued to grow and evolve as a person, whereas he has just been sort of chasing that sensation but was never able to actually achieve it. So it creates a theme that if you continue to experience new things and allow them to influence you and shape you and grow, you will become stronger than someone who doesn't have that sort of thing happen to them, which is a theme that has been reflected several times throughout the story. Isn't that amazing? They were able to like transfer that idea into a thing that happened, thereby telling a story while reinforcing a theme. And that to me is very high marks for this series. Anyways, we'll give it a D+. So, you know, it's a bit of a step up from weeks past because they had a competent action scene. Alright, next let's talk about Hima-ten, which was moving in some pretty interesting directions. Overall, pretty positive stuff. She fires our main character as her cleaner, knowing that if they have this, you know, working relationship, she'll never be able to ask him out. She'll never really be able to truly pursue him, which I thought was great. That's a good acknowledgement. That's good emotional maturity or whatever. They go on this little festival date. I was a little worried because this is so obviously a date and so obviously like lovey-dovey that it felt kind of beyond the pale for him to be ignorant and oblivious or whatever. That felt like, you know, the stupid disease of the series kind of latching onto it a bit. But he generally still kind of walks the narrow path between oblivious enough to keep the series going while still clearly kind of in his feelings and a little unsettled and unsure of what to do because part of him is definitely recognizing the possibility, at least, that she's into him. So that's good, at least. There was a big, pointless fan service moment. Sure, whatever, stupid disease pathing through like a summer cold. You catch it occasionally. And then they have like a big exposed on social media moment. At long last, they play the card of Himarin being a celebrity and it being a big scandal if she was seen with a guy. This is something they had been hinting at since chapter 1. I felt like eventually they were going to have to play this card, and then they did. But then there wasn't really any fallout from it at all. I thought this would be like an arc, of her seeing her popularity fall and in this sort of crisis and not really sure how she should navigate it and feeling bad about him and he might get exposed and harassed and all that sort of stuff I thought would be kind of interesting, but it really doesn't tonally fit with the series. And ultimately, they were just like, no, that's fine. Your fans think that this is your boyfriend, but they're cool with that. Which doesn't seem totally realistic, but I guess they had always been like, oh, Hima-ten is popular with the girls. Hima-ten is like an icon for other girls her age. So yeah, sure, I guess that's fine. And I like that they keep it light, As interesting as I think it would have been to explore that other stuff, I do like that the series has never really gotten gloomy, has never really gotten self-pitying and despairing or anything like that. But it does add both just sort of like a little bit of fuel insofar as now she's like, wow, if he was my boyfriend, that would actually be okay with all my fans. If anything, that would make my fans even more excited. That makes me all the more in love with this guy, all the more motivated to make something happen. But it also adds a little bit of a wrinkle, too, where maybe now rumors start circulating that they are going out, that he needs to navigate, of course, with him having a crush on Kana-chan. So, or not Kana-chan, sorry, Kanai-chan? Honoka? Is she actually called Honoka, or does she just seem like a Honoka? So adding like just a bit more of a complication in an interesting way, in playing something that they had foreshadowed rather than just summoning up some BS to kind of stall things. It looked like the series was kind of wrapping up for a little while because he was all prepared to confess, and we know that she likes him, so that would have been, done and dusted. But it looks like they're trying to kind of add a bit more complications and wrinkles to keep something going, which is sometimes when these sorts of rom-coms get like really, really tedious. But like I said, so far they're kind of keeping it on the narrow path down the middle. So interested to see where it goes from here. We'll give it a B+ for the month. Really enjoying this one. I didn't know if I would or not, but outside of a few kind of stupid developments, they've been keeping it pretty good. All right. Next, let's talk about Ichi the Witch. Very, very, very solid month for this series. The flashback of Minerva, the human that is married to the Chrono Weaver magic, I thought was a lot more interesting than I expected. It had some really kind of poetic, romantic moments. I loved that she had this weird kind of abandonment, despair, but hope of dying on the open sea. And then, of course, him rewinding time to save her from certain death, to save their baby, then accelerating time to wake up Ichi was very, very hype. He counterattacks. There's this kind of feeling that he is defying the fate that the prophecy magic foresaw, which, again, I'm like, I just in general do not like when they start having these sort of like prophetic characters and then it becomes more of just this puzzle of will we or will we not succumb to the prophecy, where the rules of the game feel very arbitrary, so to speak. But whatever, again, it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like on it as a concept, but if it's executed well and it's hype, then sure. Ichi then gets into a big battle, using the power of prophecy to kind of advise his attacks. He's able to use the Dream Baku magic, which he picked up in the previous arc, offensively, which basically just makes it succumb to feelings so overpowering that it is unable to fight. It's honestly like a really weird way for a main character to fight, but I like it. It's very unorthodox and kind of like creepy and villainous. But it's neat to have that as one of the tools in our MC's repertoire. I like it too because it feels like every time it will be used, it'll be very different, you know, because it's very dependent on who it's being used against, how it's depicted, and what kind of manifestation it has. So that was really cool too. He wins his fight. Then we return to Chrono Weaver and Octobomb. Chrono Weaver is dying. His full death scene talking about humans and his relationship with humanity, and beseeching the Octobomb magic to understand the beauty of humanity within this fragility. And again, it's something that I was kind of like, all right, yeah, sure, there'll be a scene like that. These are kind of the obligatory story beats. But they infused it with a lot more like poetry and beauty and significance than I expected. I was actually quite moved by this. And then, awesome moment where the fetus in the womb of Minerva is able to use time magic itself to delay the Chrono Weaver magic's death by maybe just an instant, so he can truly say goodbye to his wife or something like that, where we're gonna see. But man, it's one of the best chapters of the whole series, I think. I was very, very impressed with all of that. Really, really beautiful stuff. The good blend of just really exciting developments and then really poetic, touching moments too. And then after this, I guess we return to the death fight against the Reverser magic. Again, the ordering of stuff in this arc is a little weird to me. At kind of the macro level, the way this arc is written and all of the elements it contains is still a little off. Maybe we'll do a bit of a post-mortem once it ends. I just feel like there's just like a couple... It's not full on like cart before the horse, but just kind of like throwing out cart parts and horse parts in a strange jumbled order. Such that it's going to be really weird to have this like really beautiful moment of finality and then cut back to like Des in the throes of like this horrible feeling around her brother. I guess there could be some sort of like thematic link where it's like, you know, the Chrono Weaver magic accepts death, and then Des has to accept the death of her brother, and then there's kind of like that thematic link sort of justifies the ordering. But then after that, they're just gonna battle the Reverser magic, I guess, or maybe it'll just run away, or I don't really know what'll happen there. But it's just like, again, it's just the emotional arc of it feels weird and rocky at that macro level. But at the micro level, all of these little things are being executed so well that I really, really can't complain. We will give it an A+ for the month. Very, very excited to see more. Let's check Discord real quick. Alright, now let's move on to Blue Box, which, oh my gosh, really, really wonderful stuff. The Hina arc of her hopeless crush has finally come to a close. They really kind of extended it more than I thought. They gave it such a kind of grand finale and closure. I really, really liked just the fact that they were refocusing on it in the first place, because it kind of had what felt like a conclusion, and then it kind of had like what felt like an undoing of that conclusion, if that makes sense. Which I thought was like very, very realistic. When you have an unrequited crush on someone, it isn't really just like one moment of closure. It's just sort of like a successively stronger moments of closure until you finally kind of wake up one day and are like, yeah, I guess I'm over that. So here they have another big kind of sentimentality bomb. The series does these with increasing frequency as the chapter count grows up, where they spam you with all sorts of panels throughout their entire relationship. But every time they do it, it's really, really effective. I love the message too that Hina is just straight up like, I enjoyed having a hopeless crush on you. It brought a lot of meaning and richness and happiness to me to long for you like that, even though it was hopeless. But I'm also happy that it's over. I'm also happy that I'm getting over it. And I thought that was just very realistic as someone that's had hopeless crushes before. And also just very affirming that it's just ultimately a good thing for her. She's not left sad. She's just left satisfied and happy with the experience and moving on. Then we have this whole amusement park date with Kyo, double date, fun stuff. Chinatsu senpai back in her school uniform. Sure. There's a lot more of this than I thought. It felt like we were really kind of rushing through. Not rushing necessarily, but there was a lot of momentum with this whole like badminton arc that I thought that would be very much the focus from here until maybe the entire end of the series. So I liked that there was this kind of mini arc digression to the amusement park. Really, really lovely date between our main characters. He vows to keep playing in college and beyond, which I thought was cool. That had been kind of hinted at and foreshadowed for a little while. Surprisingly rare in these sports series. So many of them are just kind of like, all right, I made it to the end of high school. It's time to quit. Which I think is meant to be kind of like a realistic grounding of the series, that even though they're like crazy hyper athletes, the bar to be an actual pro player is even many rungs higher than that. So many of these series too, it's just like trying to battle to get to nationals. And then there's like not even a hope that they will win nationals either. And I always thought that was kind of interesting that sports shonen kind of has that depiction of like a very strong but not like the best of his generation talent. And I think too it's just sort of like the reality of the Japanese economy. It's like, why the hell would you try to be a pro athlete if you're not already in the top 0.001%? Just go get a salaryman job. Come on, stop delaying the inevitable. So it was kind of cool, and they give it a lot of gravity, a lot of weight, that he's like, I want to keep competing into my adulthood, and she vows to support him in sickness and health. It's a little pseudo marriage thing, and then they make out for a while, and it's like, it's a little spicy. Not like sexualized even, but just very intense. Like the depiction of it is extremely in your face, like taking up like 2 whole pages, I think, which is a real kind of like romance manga thing to do, to have these moments of intimacy shown in such loving detail and intimacy with the reader, let's say. But it doesn't happen in Jump that often, so I was happily surprised to see that. I thought that was kind of like a nice signifier of how strong their relationship is and how, significant we're meant to see these moments. Then we see Kyo out on his date with the manager. A lot of stuff from her perspective. We get to see how she sees him. Again, all too rare in Jump. That was really lovely. She actually attempts to confess to him, but he cuts her off and says, wait. I'm building up the courage to say the same thing to you. Can you please just wait a second and I'll get it out too? Then he does big confession at the end. She, of course, accepts. Very, very lovely. Interesting arcs for both these characters. And we get these moments of seeming finality with them, but who knows? There could be more with them to come. Hopefully more of them just happy together. I don't think we need to have this immediately be kind of like a rocky relationship. I think it really is meant to be like they finally found something that works for them, both of them. But we'll see. Really, really nice stuff, though. We'll give it an S for the month. Really, really, really strong. I can't wait, too, to get back to the badminton. As much as I like this mode, I think I like the sports mode even more. That's the beauty of this series. It does both so well. Okay. Next, let's talk about the Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi. Lots of really fun stuff here. Really, really enjoy this series. I think it's getting a physical release in English soon, which is great. I'd like to start collecting that. This is mostly just like battle. They're in the demon realm. They're trying to protect Kiyoshi so that he can come back to life. It's pretty generic, pretty straightforward. We got some more backstory of the kind of hapless dude who works with the chicken cook, why he is motivated by revenge. He sees the demon that killed his friend, Pretty generic, but I think what makes it different is that, like, the big cat demon they're fighting against is awesome. Great character design, great attacks, great sense of cruelty and this infuriating smugness and this addictive trickster kind of quality. You just want to see what he does next, but you also are really looking forward to seeing him get his ass beat. And then, in a moment of crisis, the chicken cook becomes a phoenix, and he looks awesome. It's really super badass. He turns into like a phoenix sword. They're able to defeat the cat demon. Sure. Kiyoshi, of course, eventually wakes up, starts fighting Goro's number 2. Also a pretty cool design, but I don't know. I wish that more of the characters were like the cat demon in terms of design, just like very extreme, real freaky. A lot of the enemies are just kind of like generic cool guy, badass looking humanoid demon, without too many like super extreme features. But yeah, overall, I don't know. I don't have too much to say. I think this is a mode that the series is really, really strong in. Just having these really great, stylized, kinetic, fun, full of surprises action sequences. This overall arc is, I'd say, both very fun and very exciting and not disappointing by any stretch. But I just wish it was more ambitious. I just wish there was more discovery, more mystery, more plot lines, more adventure, less just fighting, less immediate run up to fighting. I think that's what would take this series to the next level. It's like I'm rereading One Piece right now. So for like comparison, when One Piece was getting into its early 80s in terms of chapter count, we were getting Arlong Park, right? And that's like a pretty sophisticated arc that has a lot of different stuff going on. You learn about this whole island, you learn about the past, there's a substantial, like, multi-chapter flashback. You understand the characterization and roles of all these villains. There's several other good guy characters that get introduced that all have their quirks and stuff. Everything builds up and then accumulates in the famous moment of the march into Arlong Park, where all of the Straw Hats have assembled and they start fighting the Fishman Pirates, right? That happens, like, in the third of the arc. The first 2/3 of the arc are just setting that stuff up with some mysteries and trying to figure out whose side Nami is on and all these little problems and answers and twists and, build up, then start fighting. Here, I think they had like 2 chapters of build up, maybe, and then they started fighting. And then it's just been fighting ever since. And that's fine. Like, that is how it goes for most battle shonen. But like I said, I just want them to go beyond. I want them to be more like One Piece. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes in the next arc. Because I think the series is going pretty strong. I think we will see a lot more. But so far, good. Give it an A+. Very good. Alright, next let's talk about Akane-banashi. Some really, really excellent stuff here. She has mastered now her own depiction of the god of death. We don't get to see what it is, of course. We will see that during her actual performance, during the Ishoka. But that's kind of like done. There's no more kind of remaining tension of whether or not she'll be able to stitch it together. She's had her big revelation. We will learn what it is. We learn more about Rokuru's performance, the world through sound, incorporating the response and reception of the audience into his story as well, like playing off their reactions, which kind of shows the next big divide between him and Akane, that Akane has now kind of stepped outside of herself and is in the pure world of Rakugo. That was like her big revelation during the previous contest. But now it's almost like it's too pure. It doesn't have enough personality. So she needs to learn from so many people of how she can like manifest herself into the story. Again, I guess. It's kind of strange because it's sort of like a circuitous route to the style she already had, right? She had to learn how to strip everything away, and now she's just sort of adding stuff back. But it's like we haven't seen her do it yet, so we don't really know how it will be like different, if there will be some profound difference or whatever. We will see. We will see. But Rokuru's performance is fantastic. Another just great performance scene. I wish we saw even more of it. I wish there was more of the story he was telling. I feel like as the series goes on and we kind of like understand the basics of Rakugo stories and kind of the progression of them and stuff, there's less and less of an emphasis on actually telling the story in the presentation scenes, the performance scenes, I mean. And instead it's more focused on like the performance itself, what techniques are they using, how is it going over. And it kind of reflects, I think, Akane's shifting focus, that she's going from essentially being another member of the audience and just absorbing the story as if she was in the stands to judging it and critiquing it and learning from it, like as she develops that skill more and more. But I wish we just got both, because like I feel like I'm more in the audience. I am not a Rakugoka. I don't need to learn that stuff. But at any rate, really, really exciting. Then we get a bit of a time skip, and the Ishoka is at hand. It's going to take place on a cruise ship, which is very cool too. Very novel venue. I'm sure there'll be some fun stuff there. Maybe Akane gets seasick. That seems almost guaranteed, given a lot of other random Akane sickness moments. And there's a lot left to surprise here, which I really like. We knew that the planning of the Ishoka was kind of a big deal, picking out all the performers and the acts and the structuring of it. And all of that was like skipped past, right? Like we don't know who else is performing or what they'll be performing or what the expectation of the dueling god of death will be. All of that was happening during the time skip. So this is maybe one of the most potentially surprising performance scenes yet, insofar as I don't know who else will show up. And that's really exciting. So really looking forward to that. Really, really enjoying this, as always. One of my favorite things in Jump. My second favorite thing in Jump for sure. We will give it an S for the month. Now, actually, let's take a break. Alright, we're back at it talking about the Mage Next Door, which I kind of feel might be doomed to an untimely early end. I have been enjoying this one. I don't think it's like the most fantastic thing, but it reminds me a lot of Mashal, of the start of Mashal. A lot of stuff that I liked from that. I think it has a lot of pretty interesting ideas that it's kind of trickling in at an enticing rate. Some world building, some power scaling, scope defining stuff. But it doesn't seem like it will have the chance to really fill that all out as much as it would like to. It seems like it's been kind of dropping off in the table of contents, and there has been a bit of an acceleration in the pacing that makes me think they're planning on like a 20 chapter run or something. Here, they're trying to suss out some evil mages that are undercover at a school. They find out that it's just manipulated kids. There's some fun kind of school shenanigans, a comic tone that I think suits this series very well. I almost said film, I have no idea why. They do have some kind of acceleration wherein via this process they learn about the source of all of the troublesome bad mages. They also warp back to the magic realm in a way that was very funny, very anticlimactic. They kind of led you to believe that going back to the magic realm would be this really substantial, monumental task, and then they just kind of trivially go there. But again, it's something where I think that's kind of a card they had in their hand to see the magic realm again and to learn about that world, and they're playing it maybe a little suddenly, a little desperately to try to drum up some more excitement. At the same time, though, I think they have let themselves keep one window of hope open, where I think if they do manage to right the ship and get a bit more popular, it's not like it has to end now. This investigation on their first lead could end up a dead end, or just kind of lead to another kind of investigation they have to do or whatever. They haven't gone all in yet, so I like that. I like that they're not just fully committing to the speed run while still kind of moving things along, such that you can get to some interesting stuff and you can get to a climax, even if it happens in the next 5 chapters or whatever. I still just enjoy the way like battle sequences in this manga go. The gimmick of him having all of these very convenient magics that he uses in strange, inappropriate ways for battling remains pretty funny. Again, reminds me a lot of MASH, being able to replicate magic through his insane physical willpower. I liked that one of the enemies used the make you really, really lucky or really, really super unlucky. That's always fun. That always leads to very creative and funny situations. And it was a good little puzzle, too, that she figures out the weakness in the power. Kind of a pattern that the reader might notice as well. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, I'm still quite liking this. I think the art style is pretty unique too. That very like kind of sketchy, down-to-earth art style. There's just kind of a fun, laid-back attitude to a lot of this. So I hope it continues. This is one of my favorites of the more recent series. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll give it an A for the month. Really solid stuff. Next, let's talk about Sakamoto Days, which also seems like it's coming to a conclusion. There's a lot of pretty long series that I wouldn't be surprised if they ended in the next few months, and this is one of them. The third longest series in Jump right now. It seemed like we might have already just leapt into the final fight as we were following Sakamoto fighting X, aka Slur, or whatever. I was very surprised that suddenly got the spotlight, given that is almost going to certainly be our final battle. And we still had so many side characters that were in the middle of their own fights, in the middle of their own arcs. But then, of course, we do jump back into those. Nagumo, Oki, the other former Order guys, Osagiri, the guy with the hammer, I can't remember. Fighting against the electricity guy. Lots of good payoffs here. Lots of good fight scenes, action sequences, some good spots, some good feelings of speed and impact and adrenaline, and all sorts of good little gimmicks around the electricity stuff. And then one kind of final mystery introduced. Someone in like a bear suit interfering. Unclear what the payoff of that is going to be, if that's something foreshadowed that I forgot about, or a genuinely new element getting introduced in the 11th hour. This whole final saga has been a little shaky. At sometimes it felt like the pacing was too slow, too focused on characters that we hadn't been given enough reason to care about, or characters that we just had neglected for so long being brought back in a way that didn't quite feel satisfactory. And now it feels like the opposite, that the gas pedal has been slammed on, and we're getting too many characters involved, and things should be a little more drawn out and a little more detailed. So I don't know. It's a very, very hard thing to pin down, I think, the pacing and the feelings of escalation and stuff in a big climactic everybody versus everybody final arc like this. It's very, very hard to pull off in general, even though the concept of it is very straightforward. So I think they're doing an admirable job. Could be better, but definitely could be a lot worse too. I think at the end of the day, I just really enjoy the way this series does fight scenes, just action set pieces in general. They're very creative, very action movie-y. And so I'm always going to be down when it's in that mode. And this month we had a lot of that mode. We'll give it an A+. Now let's talk about Witch Watch, which is in a very strange mode indeed, as they do this whole espionage tactical action plan to retrieve the segments of the bone of Jura before Jura can be resurrected. It's going pretty swimmingly so far. At first, I thought this arc was going to be like a train wreck disaster, and of course, Jura ultimately gets revived, and they have a big battle showdown climax with her. And I still think that that's pretty likely, but they've succeeded a lot more than I thought already. There's been a really good pacing where every time they kind of solve one problem, another problem emerges, not just in result of that, but just sort of in parallel. I think that's a really good rhythm for this kind of arc to move in. It doesn't overcomplicate itself. It doesn't just overstuff you with a million things happening in parallel, but instead has a good, back and forth of step forward, step back, problem, solution, new problem, with a lot of good comedy moments too. As I said before, this idea of taking all sorts of spells that were used throughout the series to purely comedic effect, and then having to reinterpret those and use them in these like high tension situations in more of a adversarial way, using them to trick people or to find hidden things and steal them or whatever. All very, very clever. Looks like we are building up to a actual fight scene too, as the stakes kind of get higher and higher, and there's less and less possibility of getting things done peacefully. But that's a mode that the series has really excelled in before too. When they actually depict fight scenes, I think they've always been really cool. Lots of great jokes too. The picture upscaling joke of trying to replicate just a pixelated small picture and looking low res. Teleporting booze around to get people drunk. And then all these twists with Dorimi's manager also being a warlock and betraying Kanshi and trying to act American style to throw off people. Like, all these little gags that would normally be the centerpiece of a totally comedic chapter now being used as an element in this more thrilling plotline. I think it's very, very clever. All really good stuff. We'll give it an A+ for the month. I'm really just glad that they're spacing this long arc out the way they're doing it. Doesn't feel rushed at all. It doesn't feel too chaotic or too cluttered. Instead, it's just a grand, exciting adventure, right? That's what it's all about. Next, let's talk about Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, which is in a really, really bizarre mode right now. It does indeed seem like it is ending soon. It did not feel like that for quite a while. And then suddenly all of this kind of endgame stuff started happening. They started deploying kind of emergency, well, not emergency, but like the big hyped up things that we were waiting for the whole time have started happening in quite rapid succession, sometimes very suddenly. Like, Yuji is back. He just shows up. He's extremely traumatized. He's not doing well. The idea that he has persisted at his current age while generations of his friends and family have gone on to die does seem to be weighing on him very heavily, which is already a very strange direction to take your, high-spirited, courageous, beloved protagonist and to essentially be like, yeah, he is in a traumatic living hell. But then things move in a very strange direction from there. We address directly this problem of the Kylians appearing to the Sumerians as the same as cursed spirits, and such. They don't understand why the humans are destroying the cursed spirits, which is the kind of root of their conflict. Then they decide that the best way forward to prevent that is removing all cursed energy from Japan forever. That this is kind of the way forward for peace between the Earthlings and the Sumerians. But already this sort of like grandiose plan, which feels very befitting of a finale, that's like very epic and insane, and they have to bring back Mahito because he has like dominion over souls, and they're in this sort of like afterlife purgatory area orchestrating all of this. But then they're also like, well, actually, maybe that's like not a good idea, and maybe like it won't work, because there's cursed energy outside of Japan too. It's just rare, and maybe eventually cursed energy could be like a wonderful energy source that would save the earth if we can use it to get off our reliance on like fossil fuels and stuff. And all of this is also bound up with things that are kind of allegorious to like an immigration experience. Japan right now is going through a lot of internal turmoil around just how much immigration the country wants, the appetite of different demographics within the country for immigration, the economic demand for immigration, all of these policies changing around permanent residency and stuff with the election of their new prime minister. So it's like a very, very hot topic. And I do like that the series has come out very strongly pro-immigration. The messaging is very, very clear, very explicit, and I think quite moving. But then that being bound up not in like a sort of moral choice of the characters, where they just need to come to some shared understanding, but instead as this sort of like ontological problem where we can never live peacefully as long as the existence of cursed spirits, this whole thing with the Kylians and everything persists. So therefore we need this like intense, convoluted supernatural solution. To me is kind of like a strange mixed messaging. Like when you present like a real problem of like refugees that have nowhere else to go seek armistice and sanctuary in your country, which is like very, very real, but then you're also like, okay, well, the only solution to it is this like very fantastical supernatural thing that even within the rules of the series is like crazy, and how could you ever do that? It's a little odd, but whatever. And then to be like, oh, well, actually though, it's a gray area, there's goods and bads. It's like interesting, but it's just so strange. And it's conveyed just through talking. So much talking. I think there's a lot of more interesting ways you can do something like this. Like, why not go even more fantastical and show, like, possible futures where this choice is made or it isn't made, and make it very visceral and really bring the weight of the decision by showing you, depictions of what would happen either in the imagination space, or you have a character that can somehow prophesize these things and see visions of it, or even you just full send commit and show one future and then say, surprise, guess what, we can revise this future. Whatever. Something that makes it a lot more evocative and a lot more, like, not just kind of speculation, not just talking. There is some nice imagery still. I really like seeing Yuji's kind of perfected domain. That looked very badass. Still just, like, the real hallmarks of this series' visual identity are coming through strongly. But there's just so much dialogue, too, and it's like, I just, when I start reading, like, paragraph after paragraph of dialogue, I'm just like, what is the point? what is this building to? Is it meant to be like the message of this as it relates to the human experience is what's meant to be interesting, or is this interesting in the context of like the rules and mechanics of the series, and I'm meant to kind of infer certain truths or untruths based on my understanding of like the fictional mechanics of the world? Or is it meant to be just like entertaining in and of itself to just see Yuji again and to kind of glean his characterization? It's probably like all of the above to whatever extent, but it wasn't working as well for me. Not bad, but like not great either. Nowhere near as excessive as like Hunter x Hunter though. I'll say that for sure. But heading down that path, which to me is a dangerous path. The path of, why are you even making manga at this point? We'll give it an A for the month. Very, very curious to see where it goes from here as it wraps up in probably the next month or two. Okay, next we'll talk about Me and Roboco, which had some pretty exciting chapters. Bowling one, which is very fun, just classic gag comedy scenario. And then Progress is kind of crazy. Gorilla, Gachi, and Akane out on a date. She confesses. They start dating. Huge development in the series. Actual disruption to the status quo episodic nature. Pretty cool. Pretty heartwarming. Very cute. Very fun. Some great gags too. Then they lean into this with the very next chapter being all about Gorilla Gachi being insufferable about his new relationship, developing an entirely new persona of the romantic gorilla, and becoming very, very annoying when he does so. Great fun as well. Good times, good times. And then, in the latest chapter, we have a hallmark of the series, something I really enjoy, which is Roboco trying to be a mangaka, and then, of course, just ripping off all sorts of other things within Jump. This starts as like a tribute to the Elusive Samurai, which had just ended a week before. And then she just sort of samples, you know, several popular series, and it's that old shtick. But then it ends with a bit of a shocker, a pretty, like, whoa moment, where the editor, second year, is finally like, actually, this one has potential. Let's talk about the serialization of this one. And wordlessly, it cuts to the manuscript he's talking about. And the title is Me and Roboco. And it's like, oh my god. Could this be the beginning of the end? Because that kind of like meta thinking of like, Roboco is the creator of Me and Roboco. This is like the accumulation of her manga adventures is creating the series that she's in. It's like that feels very final. Like, where can they go from there? You know? And it had this sort of light element of profundity, light poetic feeling of gravity, where you're like, oh, wow. That's the series. It's Me and Roboco. That's the one. But I don't want it to end, man. I don't want it to end. It's a gag comedy. It doesn't have to end. You're telling me you ran out of ideas? Miyazaki sensei? Come on, man. Don't do this to me. This is the most consistent thing in Jump besides One Piece. It's the longest running series in Jump right now besides One Piece. And Hunter x Hunter, but, you know, that's a whole other situation. I wanted this to be the new Kochi Kame. I wanted this to run until my grandchildren were reading Jump, right? Like, I thought Roboco was immortal. That's the whole idea. She's a robot. So I don't know. I'm a little spooked. I just, it had a certain aura. That last panel that felt like maybe that's the beginning of the end. And it, I don't know, it's about Roboco actually getting into Jump and Bondo reading Jump and reading her manga in the actual Jump and going, wow, Roboco, this is peak. And that's the end. And that's like her dream is to be a beloved idol of all. And she achieves that by becoming a mangaka or whatever with the series Me and Roboco. I don't know. Did I just tell you what will happen in the next 3 chapters? And then it's the last chapter? I don't know. I hope not. I really hope not. As I said, Sakamoto Days, probably ending soon. Elusive Samurai, it just ended. That's 2 super long running series down. Witch Watch might end sooner than later. Blue Box might end sooner than later. Those are things where we're moving into kind of endgame type stuff. He's in his final badminton tournament, and they're trying to prevent finally once and for all the resurrection of Jura. The whole magazine is falling apart. All the 200 Club, it's ending. What's gonna be left after all that? New Way? Say it ain't so. If Roboco ends too, then what becomes the longest running thing after all that? Akane. Oh, Akane. Akane will go forever. Come on. Anyways, we'll give it an A+ for the month. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy this series. Because I have the brain of a 12-year-old and I laugh at stupid things. And this has many funny, stupid jokes. And I want it to just continue. Anyways, next let's talk about something that's definitely not continuing. Gonron Egg, unfortunately, looks like it is preparing for the end. It might even get under 21, as we have just rushed forward to the final battle. A lot of stuff, speed ran, off-screen training arc, off-screen 3-year time skip, where they're like, yup, we did everything and now we're prepared for the final battle. Sure, the post-time skip stuff was very awkward too, calling back to all these relationships that we didn't get to see, throwing a bunch of characters at us and being like, these are his friends now. It felt almost spiteful, being like, well, this is what would happen in 3 years of serialization if we got a chance to show all of it. So we're just going to skip to the end of that. But whatever. They start the big final battle, and a bunch of that is glossed over as well. It's just like, wow, we made it to the showdown. Now we're going to have a big showdown with the big boss. Very, very disappointing, because I know the series has its detractors, but I was always a fan. I thought it had a real darkness to it, a real gross grittiness that really set it apart from a lot of stuff that Jump has had lately. I don't think it was flawless. I think it had a few kind of overcommitments, let's say, and it had some difficulty, I think, finding a good rhythm. But like the monster designs were so gnarly, the attacks were so gnarly, the world building was so grim and gross and disgusting, with the forests of flesh being raised, of slave nations of humans, the edginess of the Human Liberation Army too, that they themselves feasted on the hearts of the enemies and have become half monster, half man. Like, I don't know, there was a lot to like here, and I was very curious if it was able to get into the mode of like a big arc. I thought that's where it could shine, because it did seem to have some ambitions of like actual adventure and actual mystery. And if you go back to what I was saying about the Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, the ambitions that I wish I would have, I think this series too could have really kind of handled that sort of ambition. And they made gestures towards it. They made gestures to the great feeling of going to a mysterious place and like not knowing what's going on, and then putting it together through a series of revelations and conflicts and battles. Not quite there, though. Not quite there. And it did indeed announce that it was hitting its super climax, so this might be one of our fastest cancellations since I started this project. Alas, but we will see it through. We'll give it a A-. I think it's pretty solid stuff. People complain about the art style. Yeah, alright. It's a little sloppy, maybe. But it has some pretty freaking sweet-looking moments, too. People say it's, like, generic, but I don't really see it. I think it's very unique within Jump in terms of just its atmosphere and vibe. Pretty unique within manga in general. Everything else is just blue sky isekai nonsense. This at least kind of had some edge to it. This at least had a sense of violence and danger. I don't know. We'll see how it closes out. I sure hope the mangaka takes another stab at this stuff. I think he's got a good twisted mind, which we want to see from a mangaka. Now let's talk about One Piece. Again, you can always read my One Piece watch my One Piece thoughts as I read it in depth with the chapter-by-chapter videos. I've actually been rereading One Piece from the start because a friend of mine agreed to start reading it, so I was inspired to go back to where it all began and reread it from the start, and kind of... My plan was to experience it alongside him, but he has been slacking. Actually, I'm getting dinner with him tonight, so I'm going to lay into him about that. Motherfucker, read some One Piece. It's the best! It's the best! Rereading it, I'm even more convinced it's the best. I'm enjoying it more than ever, I think. It's my first total reread in quite a while. I've reread random arcs here and there, but man, it's so good. Like, even right off the bat, it's so good. It also does drive home for me. It's like really, really changed. Some ways I think not for the better. Of course I still absolutely adore One Piece. It's still my favorite manga, still my favorite thing running. Still the thing I'm most excited to read week by week, but I do think some stuff was lost too. There's definitely less of a focus on the Straw Hats themselves. In general, kind of small character moments are less frequent and less impactful. And now things just operate on such a huge scale. Not literally a gigantic scale. But so many, moments of kind of zooming in on one small kind of flourish or action or whatever, I think kind of get lost in the shuffle of just how much is going on and how much needs to be depicted and kind of how deep in the weeds of lore and characterization we are now. At any rate, it's still fucking peak. Jarl making the grand stand of being an enemy to the world government, peak. Gunko and Brook's backstory, understanding that, of course, Gunko is also going to become a good person eventually. The classic take the mask off and become good. But whatever. Peak. They do finally take a big step forward and retaliate substantially against the enemy. I liked that. It's always got to be kind of a push and pull. And then the big cathartic moment, trying to save the kids as they march to their doom off the side of the tree. Summers being a total psychopath. Great moment there. But the real intense emotional stuff of the parents crying out to the kids, I thought that was really well done, really gut-wrenching. Just the specificity they got into with all these giant kid characters, that they each have their own little personality and design quirks and stuff, and all of that just kind of getting paid off here in these last moments. And then, of course, they're saved. Boom. Explosion. Big hype. Loki transforming into some crazy big animal. Drawing on Nordic mythology again. He's the Needhog, I believe. I need to do like a little Wikipedia dive, I think, to kind of solidify some of the Nordic mythology that's being referenced here. Probably a lot of it is going over my head, but the weight of it and the aura of it, I think, is still very strongly felt. So yeah, really, really great stuff. It truly is a different series now than it was back in the day, but one that I also adore. We'll give it an S+ for the month. Now let's talk about Shinobi Undercover. Really enjoying this arc. Series has had its ups and downs for me, but I think this arc has been fantastic. The just very straightforward premise. They're raiding this house. It's a ninja house full of tricks and traps and enemy ninja. They have to go save their teacher, double agent, now maybe triple agent woman from the prison basement. Good setup and then good execution. Great sense of like a location which has its own atmosphere. The fights unfolding very organically and dynamically. I like this idea of Yodoka being out of comms range for the first time ever and having to act on his own. That was a really good payoff, that we kind of realized that hadn't happened yet. And he's just sort of so neurotic and incompetent as soon as that link is removed. Thought that was very funny. Then all sorts of like side character battles. I think they've hit a good flow again, where when the Kekai was first introduced, I was kind of disappointed because it's like I thought the ninja action was so good. And then now they have superpowers, and it felt like it would just be kind of flattening and uninteresting, but they've managed to kind of get it going again so that it's once again more kinetic and more creative. Now that it's not just the novelty of, oh my god, they can breathe fire or whatever, but seeing that used in interesting ways is great. The way the ninja traps were reintroduced as well is very cool. And then a little twist where he meets the male heir of this family, who for unknown reasons has been imprisoned in the dungeon. And he's like a very strange, quirky guy. He has all these jokes around how he's got basically nothing down there, but he still has to act very noble, like he's a good host. So he's like brewing tea out of like chunks of wood and stuff. Very, very funny. Really good expansion of the scope of this arc. Ultimately, I think it could go further. I can tell already that it's just going to end up being Yotaka battling this guy, and that's going to be Yotaka's like big battle. They're not ambitious enough to kind of have the second level where like it becomes like a three-way misunderstanding based melee where that imprisoned son is tricked somehow into believing in the wrong enemy or something. I don't need to break it down in detail because it's not going to happen. So I think there's like one further step to greatness, but right now it is still good. Just lots of good personality, lots of good action. I think the series has been getting better and better. I'm very, very glad that it shed away some of the stuff at the beginning that I just felt was a little too gimmicky, just wasn't really landing for me. In doing so, they've moved further and further away from this idea that he is an undercover shinobi, but, that is how it is. Instead, it is just good shinobi action, and I like it. We'll give it an A- for the month. Next, we will talk about Kagurabachi, which had a very, very major development here. I thought it was going in a totally different direction. It seemed like it was just like ending. It seemed like they were doing everything that they could at the end of the series. I thought, the one route to a continuation had been very emphatically closed off. But I actually misunderstood. I thought it was that Samura had revived Chihiro, so Chihiro could have one last battle with the Swordmaster. But no, in fact, it's Samura revives himself for one last showdown with the Swordmaster, so Chihiro can flee. Then all of the able-bodied people run off and leave. We see that final showdown with Samura and the Swordmaster. Awesome. The Swordmaster asserts control over the Kabunabi. And then it's like, okay, now I see where this is going. And then sure enough, they recoup. They start to try to figure out what the Swordmaster's plan is. They start to try to come up with some countermeasures. Can they revive Samura? Can they reforge the enchanted blade? Chihiro himself goes back to the forge, truly following in the footsteps of his father now to make a new enchanted blade, which is something I think they did this really well, where we always, like, it always made sense that could happen. They always emphasize that he is the son of the swordsmith and that he grew up watching his father create swords and he has his own vision of a sword and all of this stuff. But it never felt like it was just dangling over our head, him going, if only I had my own sword or whatever. It was like well articulated in the series that no, we shouldn't make more enchanted blades, and that this is quite literally the nuclear option, that he himself needs to create another one and introduce it into the world in order to have a chance to fight back against the Swordmaster. So it was at once both like very surprising but also very satisfying to see him go back to the forge and start hammering away at the blade. Like, it really felt like a full circle moment to the start of the series, to the concept of the series, while also being like an exciting escalation. Like, it never felt sure that this was gonna happen, great stuff. And then boom, at that moment, drop end of part 1, which is one of the most hype things a manga can do. If it starts using that sort of language to refer to itself, end of part 1 shows a lot of ambition, because you're kind of committing yourself to at least another 100 chapters. You don't want part 2 to be paltry compared to part 1. But I think the timing of that and the impact of that was fantastic. I don't know. I wouldn't say I count myself as one of the biggest Kagurabachi heads. I like the series quite well, but some people are absolutely crazy for it. But every once in a while, they have a moment like this where I'm like, yeah, I've been, my aura has been farmed or whatever. Like you got me. That's fucking awesome. Yup, that's fucking awesome. All right, good job. You know. And this was one such moment. So yeah, very very excited. I think the structuring is very good. What they need to nail for me now is like really making it feel different. Now that the Sword Master has like returned to power, I assume there will be like another little time skip and then kind of like a side quest where he's trying to gather allies as a counterforce or something like that. Some smaller arcs and stuff building up to the next big climax of challenging the Swordmaster once more. And it's like those smaller arcs, that sense of adventure and stuff needs to have like a new tone to it, I think, to reflect that it's part 2. That's what I'm hoping for. And that's tough. That's tough. But I think they can pull it off. Then we had a strange little deviation chapter, noted by it being 112.1 instead of 113, which was about Soya Sanzanami, one of the auction house brothers, the oldest brother. He was a real fucked up guy. He's now totally amnesiac, trying to discover who he is. I thought it was quite fun. I think they took it to a good extreme. A lot of these amnesiac stories, they let the characters off easy. Whereas here, like, it really did feel like he was scraping together, understanding, like, his sadism, understanding his twisted understanding of love for his brother, feeling kind of, like, judgmental and critical of himself, being like, what the fuck was wrong with me, as it comes together. I assume that this is going to build into a plot arc of the main story as well. Otherwise, why isn't this just like a Tankobon Omake chapter? I think... But then I guess the question is, why not make it like a full numbered chapter too? But whatever, I think that's good ambition. I think it's good to kind of bring back these characters. That's something that will really extend the scope of your series if you're able to weave old characters that have already had one complete arc back into the plot in an interesting way. So yeah, could be good. Give it an A+ for the month. Really, really good. Now let's talk about Hero Girl and Demon Lord. Call it quits. This one, I don't know. I'm like mixed feelings. Sometimes it makes me laugh. Other times I'm just kind of like, wow, we're really just going through the motions here. Some funny ones. The karaoke party is funny. She doesn't want to be exposed as the hero. Pretty basic and silly, but it's got some pretty good jokes. Then one where we meet her hero's party. Again, some funny jokes, whatever. But then they start going in some directions that were kind of odd to me. It seems like they kind of wanted to do a bit of a premise shift. Maybe it wasn't performing as well as they hoped to. So now the Demon Lord is going to attend school, and the humor really changed in that chapter as well to be much more like bantery, much more like Bokeh Tsukomi, where the Demon Lord is a bit more of like the Bokeh just because he's just like strange, and then the hero is kind of Tsukomiing by like pointing out how bizarre this is and like lampshading how incongruous the fantasy element is or whatever. It reminded me a lot of Someone Hurts, actually, which is a comedy series that's performing way better. And then they had foreshadowed earlier that the Demon Lord used to be a human, and that he may in fact turn back into a human, and then he just does, kind of for no reason. But it's only temporary, but it very clearly shows that, like, oh, once he's fully human again, him and the hero girl are gonna have, like, a romantic relationship. But, like, that kind of weirds me out, even though they're like, oh, well, when he was a human, he was basically, like, 16, and then he turned into the Demon Lord and became immortal, and now he's, like, 1,000 years old, but his brain is still of a 16-year-old, so that's not creepy. But, like, it is kind of creepy, not even because of that, not even because, like, oh, well, he's really 1,000, but because up until this point, they had a domestic relationship that was much more like father-daughter, or at least like older roommates. Like, he had all of these like domestic duties and was like sending her off to school and was being kind of like a guardian, and it was all around the comedy gap between the fact that he's actually like extremely powerful and competent and has all of these magical abilities, but was doing such domestic things. The gap between him being kind of like the head of the household and helping her out and stuff, but then also having all these like foibles and being so ill-suited to like human society, right? So for them to kind of like have that role for like a dozen chapters and then be like, or maybe he's her boyfriend, just feels a little gross. And then I thought this was really weird too, okay? Is that the Demon Lord is like brown, right? Like you can see right here, this is how he looks in color. He's like brown. It's not like an unrealistically brown skin tone. That's just the color that like a lot of people are, right? But then when he turns into a human, he becomes white. Like, well, he becomes like Japanese, but his skin tone turns white. And it's like, oh, so he wasn't just like a brown dude. It's like he was like a demon that was brown. So like, why not like make him like red or something, right? Like, why choose like a realistic skin tone and then be like, well, that's not actually his skin tone. He was like doing magical brown face or something. And to me, just this feeling of like, oh, well, now that he's like a human and definitely like a romantic interest, now he looks like just a Japanese dude. But if he turned into a human and like lost his horns and his pointy ears and didn't have magic, but he was just like a brown-skinned human, that wouldn't be acceptable? I don't know. You can be like, oh, Casey, you're so woke. But, like, it's just a little weird to me. I don't know. Nah. And I guess just because I wasn't feeling the series that much in the first place, I'm, like, a little extra skeptical, and I'm just kind of like, the hell does that mean? But it's just weird to me. I think also just because kind of, I like that there is, like, a brown dude in Jump, right? Like, that's few and far between. I like that Des is, like, a black woman witch. That's awesome. And now there was another one. That's like it. But I was like, cool. One of our major characters in a new series is like a person of color. But no, it's a demon lord of color is a person of Japanese. So I don't know. We'll give it a B- for the month. As I said, the first few chapters kind of fun, and then it just started getting weird for me. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes from there. Next, and possibly finally, let's talk about Someone Hertz. I think this is our last one for the month. Scrolling to my notes. Where are my notes? Nice one this month. Nice mix between kind of more rom-com-y, affectionate chapters. I like the pacing on that. Nice, slow, and steady. Small gestures, small signals of closeness and importance and intimacy. That's what the 1v1 rom-com is all about. Slow and steady and not promising too much. And then they go in a really cool direction where there's an offline meetup for a bunch of the listeners. I like when it's in this mode where it feels a lot more like shonen-y. This just very dynamic cast of characters that are all like their rivals. They all have like power levels of how many times they get read on air. There's some funny ones in here. I wish they were even crazier, though, because it's not like you need these characters to be reasonable. They don't need to be core parts of the story. So why not make them, like, even more memorable, even more wacky? Whereas most of them, you know, are just kind of as quirky as the main characters, which is fine. I did like how they were all created. I liked their designs. I liked Mr. Hateful Eight, which is one of her main rivals. He gets the spotlight in the most recent chapter, hanging out with the MC, talking about how to become funnier, what makes him funnier. He's just like a perpetually unfortunate person. All these unlucky things keep happening to him. That's fun. And then it reinforces, you know, this is another very shonen-y aspect of the series, that this aspirational theme of him trying to get funnier, trying to level up and get to their level, which feels very sports shonen-y and stuff, and I think was well expressed there. So yeah, really enjoying this one. Nothing mind-blowing, not my favorite or anything, but really, really strong representation of the 1v1 rom-com. I just really hope that the people, like, this has really blown up in popularity, which is great. I'm really, really glad it's doing so well. Probably will get an anime and stuff before too long. All of that is great. I just hope, though, that people reading this and enjoying it recognize, hey, this is like an example of what has become like a very tried and true tradition of this sort of like quirky girl, mostly regular dude, or relatively regular dude with his foibles too, having a very 1v1 low stakes, low key slice of life, slow burn romance with some sort of theming. There's like a dozen of these that I personally am reading, probably several more dozen that are in print right now. It is like the hot genre, I feel like, outside of fucking isekai and sisekai and stuff. Get on board. There's a lot of good ones. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We will give it a B+ for the month. And yes, indeed, that is the last one to talk about. Good stuff, good stuff. Here's our tier list. Elusive Samurai going out super, super strong on that one. And in this one as well. The coveted P rank. Everything else shuffling around its typical normal spots. Strong debut of Alien Headbutt. Not so strong debut of Kintaro's Magic, but we will see. Let's look forward to next week. Bye-bye.